Many people seem to think that the Christopher Nolan Batman trilogy is the best representation of this character, and while I do agree somewhat, there were certain aspects that were kind of lacking in the trilogy in my opinion. So when you think about Batman, what are some of the first things that come to mind? Well, obviously he's the world's greatest detective and skilled in many martial arts and all sorts of other fighting styles like Kung Fu, Taekwondo, Karate, Muay Thai, and the list goes on and on. Oh, and of course he's a billionaire playboy because why not?
I'm going to have to ask you to leave. It is not a question of money.
You see, I'm buying this hotel.
So when you watch a Batman movie, you do kind of expect to see some great fight scenes and some solid action sequences. And that's one of the things that I feel that the Dark Knight trilogy failed to deliver on. Don't get me wrong, there are some great action sequences in all of the movies, but I'm specifically focusing on the fight scenes. Like when Batman is in hand-to-hand combat with like enemies or whoever, then it just doesn't quite feel as great as it should. So let's go all the way back to the early 2000s, starting off with Batman Begins. And like any great origin story, we have to start off with a young Bruce Wayne. So Bruce Wayne falls down a well and then wakes up in some prison camp type thing. And this is where we get our first kind of fight scene in the movie. But obviously I'm not expecting this fight scene to be spectacular in any way because he hasn't become Batman yet, he's not trained, he's still an inexperienced Bruce Wayne, so what really can you expect? But overall for an average guy to get into a fight, he does pretty well.
Why? For protection! I don't need protection! Protection for them!
Anyways, Bruce Wayne now gets recruited by the League of Shadows and gets trained by Ra's al Ghul, but at this point in the movie we don't know that it's Ra's al Ghul. So we get a typical training montage of Bruce Wayne learning how to fight, and he gains experience and goes through all sorts of training. And I actually like the sequence where they're on the ice and Bruce Wayne's getting kind of cocky, but then he just ends up falling straight through the ice.
You haven't beaten me. You have sacrificed sure footing for a killing stroke.
But then we get to the point where they want Bruce to execute someone.
I will go back to Gotham and I will fight men like this, but I will not become an executioner.
So Bruce ends up doing the only logical thing, which is starting a fire, which ultimately kills like everyone in that entire place. But technically he didn't execute them, it was the fire that did, the fire that he started. So Bruce manages to escape and saves Ra's al Ghul, and then he makes his way back to Gotham with the help of Alfred. And now we get to the point where Bruce Wayne starts to become Batman. So Bruce goes to Lucius Fox, and acquires all the equipment and gadgets that he will need for his vigilante business, which Wayne Enterprises just so conveniently has.
Kevlar utility harness, gas-powered magnetic grapple gun, the 350-pound test monofilament, Nomex survival suit for advanced infantry, Kevlar biweave.
But anyways, now we get the first real fight scene with Batman. So Batman shows up at the docks where he basically hides in the shadows and picks off the bad guys one by one. And I'm not gonna lie, the reveal of Batman is pretty epic.
Where are you?
And we do get some basic kind of fights with Batman at this point, but it's nothing you'd really expect from someone who's like a trained assassin, like a skilled martial arts ninja type guy. And the way it's filmed just doesn't really feel exciting in any way. And I know that a lot of people say, well, this is more realistic because this is how Batman would actually fight, because he gets tired and it's difficult and he's weighed down by a suit, so it's really awkward for him to be as quick and agile as he would normally be. But remember, Batman is supposed to be a superhero who is in peak human condition, who is able to have like stamina for days and accomplish all sorts of feats that no normal human would ever be able to do. So that argument doesn't really make sense to me. And then we end off the movie with a very lackluster fight between Batman and Ra's al Ghul on a train. Like, don't get me wrong, this movie is great, but this fight just, the quick cuts every 2 seconds, and it's just very disorienting. And not to mention that Ra's al Ghul is just as good a fighter as Batman, if not better in some cases. So you'd expect this to be an amazing sequence with two like highly skilled fighters going head to head in some amazing choreography. Because remember, Batman is supposed to be that type of character, but then we don't really see that. Batman just kind of knocks him out a bit and then ditches the train and lets the train kill Ra's al Ghul.
I won't kill you. But I don't have to save you.
But again, he didn't murder him, so his conscience is still technically clear, I guess. I don't know.
This is big brain time.
And upon rewatching, I mean, it is kind of sad to see that the big climactic ending is not really that climactic. Which brings us to the end of Batman Begins. And as an origin story, I mean, it's really great. But when it comes to the fight scenes, which is something that should really be focused on when making a Batman movie, I think anyways. Like, it was rather disappointing. But anyways, now we move on to The Dark Knight, so maybe that's better. So at the start of the movie, we see Batman stopping all the imposters with his fancy gadgets and his Batmobile and all sorts of things. And we do kind of get to see a bit more of him fighting, definitely more than he did in the first one, but it's still kind of okay. But again, Batman isn't fighting anyone skilled, so it wouldn't make sense for him to kind of use all his fancy moves, I guess.
What's the difference between you and me?
I'm not wearing hockey pads.
Listen, I love DC as much as the next person, but it really seems like the MCU, or even just Marvel in general, can really film some great and solid fight scenes and action sequences. Look at the Deadpool movies and Daredevil, the Captain America trilogy. There are just such great fight sequences in all of those movies. And I'm not trying to compare and say one's better than the other, but I just feel like that is what was really missing in the Christopher Nolan trilogy. And I know that they improved the fight scenes drastically in Ben Affleck's iteration. I think his fight sequences were just top-notch compared to these movies. And then we move over to Hong Kong, where Batman has managed to sneak in and track down Lau. And we do get some more fights with Batman. They are great action sequences, like that moment where Batman is chasing down Joker in the Batmobile. I mean, everyone is going to remember that when thinking about this movie. Or even the opening scene with the Joker bank heist.
I believe whatever doesn't kill you simply makes you stranger.
But again, it's very different to a great fight sequence. And then we get Batman beating up some of Joker's goons, which I feel should have gone a lot better than what ended up happening. But you know, it is what it is. And that's really about it when it comes to the fight scenes in this movie. Like, it was really just non-existent in my opinion. So I don't know if Christopher Nolan didn't really care about filming many fight scenes with Batman, or I don't know, maybe there was some other reason for it. But even if you look at the early 2000s Spider-Man movies, again, Spider-Man is another one of those characters that is known for his agility and his fast reflexes and being able to take out bad guys in all sorts of fun and awesome ways. And we see a lot of that in those movies. So it just begs the question, like, why did Christopher Nolan not really include a lot of fight scenes with Batman? It really just boggles my mind. Ending off with The Dark Knight Rises. And I know that this isn't many people's favorite of the trilogy, like it's probably everyone's least favorite, but I think that it probably has some of the best fight scenes compared to the previous two movies. And it's ironic that I say that because the first fight scene we get is with Batman and Catwoman fighting all the thugs on the roof, which like, did you see this guy in the background who fell over from nothing? Oof, like, somehow that managed to get past everyone making this movie. But on the plus side, the next fight scene we see is with Batman going up against Bane. And this may be one of the best fight scenes in, like, any Batman movie. Somehow they managed to step up their game so much because Bane felt like an absolute beast in this scene. He was just terrifying. Every hit that Bane threw was like a sledgehammer just hitting Batman. And not to mention the fact that he broke Batman's back.
Ah, yes! I was wondering what would break first. Your spirit or your body?
I mean, this scene alone almost makes up for all the previous awful fight scenes. So even though this movie isn't everyone's favorite, there's no denying that this fight scene with Bane is just so iconic. Like the dialogue, the tension between these two characters, because obviously Batman has been retired for a few years, so he's not as quick as he used to be, and you can really see it in this scene. And I've actually made an entire breakdown of this scene, which you can check out over here. Also, I would really appreciate it if you tap that like button and subscribe if you haven't yet.
Theatricality and deception. Powerful agents to the uninitiated.
So anyways, after Bane paralyzed Batman, he's basically down for the count for almost the entire duration of the movie. You know, obviously until he comes back at the end and then has his revenge against Bane, which, wasn't as exciting as it was the first time. I mean, obviously Batman did manage to defeat him by knocking the tube out of his air breather things, whatever you call it. So, and that's kind of really how it ends. Like, Bane doesn't really get taken down in a way which is satisfying, in my opinion.
About the whole no guns thing, I'm not sure I feel as strongly about it as you do.
And that kind of wraps it up. I mean, those were really all the fight scenes that we got in this entire Batman trilogy. And going back and looking at it now, like, I really feel that it was such a missed opportunity. And if one of you guys knows why they didn't have Batman fighting more, or just film the fight scenes in a way that was just so much more engaging, like, I don't know why the choreography just didn't feel as great. Like, if you compare to the John Wick movies, those fight scenes are just on an entirely different level. And I just hope that in the new DCEU or Robert Pattinson's Batman, we get to see more fight scenes where it's just so well choreographed and where it's just not cut like every 2 seconds, and it just kind of takes you out of the experience and you don't really feel as immersed as you'd want to. By the way, if you want to check out my full playlist on the Nolan trilogy, then click here, and I'll see you guys in the next one.